Hi everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Bear with me a little bit longer here. Okay. So I've just added a note to chat that all questions should be added to Padlet. And you all should have the link to that. Okay. The chat function has been shut down. It was just too difficult in our last meeting to manage questions that were coming in through chat and questions that were being asked, raised hands, and then the Padlet as well. So please put any questions that you have into Padlet, and that way I can deal with them in order. Okay. I will also keep microphones muted until I call on you. If you wish to speak, please use the raised hand. We have already over 30 participants in the room, and so any background noise might make it difficult for individuals to hear someone speaking, and so try and keep your mics muted unless I call on you. We are still getting a few more requests to join, and in a couple of minutes we will begin. Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Well, everyone is so silent. Are we waiting something?
Yes, Abelai, I've asked everyone to keep their mics muted unless they're called upon to speak, because there's so many people in the Zoom room that any background noise would make it difficult for individuals to hear. So we're just waiting for the last few people to join us here, giving people a couple more minutes. Okay, we'll get started in a minute. And actually, I am going to turn off my video because I'm going to switch to sharing my screen shortly. Okay, so for those of you who have just joined us in the last couple of minutes, I have shut down the chat on this Zoom session, and I am asking everyone to instead enter their questions into the Padlet screen so that everybody is able to view them and can decide whether to uptick a question or not. if you have a question that if you don't understand an explanation that I'm giving or an answer that I'm given, please raise your hand and I will call on you to speak. But please enter any new questions into the Padlet screen. Does anybody need me to send out the link to that Padlet again? Okay, don't see any indications that you do. So, okay. Well, good afternoon. Thank you for joining me today. We have over 40 students in this session, so it is a large group. Bear with me, I'll do my best to answer all of your questions. Today is devoted to the proof of evaluation, although I do know that sometimes questions arise about other sections because it has an impact on the proof of evaluation or such. So I will do my best to answer as many questions as possible. We do have another session planned for Friday. I believe that session is at 3:30. You all should have received a Google Calendar invite to that one as well. That one is a to be announced section. We don't yet have a particular focus. So certainly if you have a particular interest or you think that there's something I do need to offer as a focus, I am quite willing to entertain some suggestions for that. Okay. Let's get started with the question that has the most upticks. So this was submitted by Anonymous. If I have 2 evaluation criteria, can I write 1 paragraph for each? If there are no negative sides of my solution, should I write a debate or not? And how many words must we include in this section? Okay, I'm going to deal with the last question first, because it's the easiest one to answer. There is no specific word length required for any particular section of a case study. Okay. It depends on your topic. It depends on how much of an explanation you need to give in your solution. It depends on many different factors. So I cannot tell you a specific range of words. What I can tell you is that the proof of evaluation section is one of the most important sections of your case study. It is the section in which you are attempting to persuade the reader that your decision on the solution is correct. So your decision is, do you adopt the solution? Do you not adopt it? Do you adopt it in certain circumstances? Do you adopt it with some degree of caution? What is your decision? So one very important aspect of the case study is to remember that this is a professional document. When writing it, imagine that you are a lower level manager in a corporation or organization, and the chief executive officer or the president or whoever it is at the very top of the organization has asked you to write a report, a case study that analyzes a particular solution that they have heard about and whether or not it will work for a problem in the organization or company. Okay, you are trying to show to the president or the CEO of the corporation that your decision is correct and that they should act upon it according to your advice. Okay. This is the purpose of a case study in many, many situations. So as you can imagine, one of the most important things to do is first get the CEO to understand what the solution is and what it actually comprises of. This is what goes into the solution section. And then the proof of evaluation. How should it be evaluated? How is it evaluated? Is it good? Is it bad? How is it good? How is it bad? Where are the kind of lines between good and bad? And so it's very important that this section be complete. So the question you need to ask yourself is not how many words, but is it complete? Have I done my job in convincing this person that my decision is the correct one and they should take my advice. Okay. If you only have two evaluation criteria, yeah, it might work out to being one paragraph for each. It might work out to that one of them has two paragraphs. That it depends on what the content is of what your evaluation is. You know, is it a mixed amount, mixed good and bad around that criteria, or is it all good? Is it all bad? So it really depends on what you're trying to say, how you might want to organize those paragraphs. But generally speaking, organizing the paragraphs around a criteria is a good approach. Okay. There's always exceptions, but that's generally a good approach. If there are no negative sides to my solution, really? No negative sides? There's absolutely nothing that is a limitation. Or can I ask who asked this question, or if somebody has the same issue and would like to share with me their context?
Yeah, I would like to say, so I didn't write this question, but yeah, I have the solution that has almost no any negative sides, because it kind of solved the problem back in 2012, and according to its characteristics, it's kind of sufficient, and it still works. I mean,
Okay, it
so
worked.
yeah,
It worked,
it does
but
work,
is it
and it's still
absolutely perfect?
so there is some difficulties, and I think I already mentioned it in my evaluation of a solution. So
Okay.
yeah, there is little difficulties, but
Okay.
these difficulties also overwhelmed and kind of solved.
Okay, so it wouldn't be presented as a debate. It would be although there were some challenges in da 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 da, this was a good solution because of da 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 da, right? So you can still have that contrast statement without it being a debate. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, does anybody have a follow-up on that? No? Okay, so let's move on to Jansaya's question here. This section, I assume she is meaning about the proof of evaluation, comprises of two criteria, two paragraphs, and what about the third paragraph? Is it conclusion? Okay, so I think you're talking about the Boeing example. Is that correct, Jansaya?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, the Boeing example worked out to being two paragraphs and then a little bit of a brief recap that kind of summed up the arguments that were made. That's not necessarily how it has to be done. Some people may have more criteria. The reason that the Boeing was written that way was because it was quite complex, and how all those pieces fit together to create this mixed picture of whether it would be okay or not, and the leaning towards the not okay. That is why there was this kind of recap at the end to make sure that that was really clear for the reader. It doesn't necessarily always have to be that way. Remember that with our examples, they are just that, they are examples. They are examples of one way, one thing that worked for that particular content. Okay, they are not templates. So I would suggest that, yes, that's what you are seeing in the Boeing example, but yours does not need to be that way. It may not work that way.
Excuse me, can
Yes.
I add a little? So I currently opening the case Boeing example, and
Yes.
for me, it seems like there is three criteria. So I think that's why there is three paragraphs.
Yes, well, it depends on how you read it. And so that's a quite a logical idea as well. So Abelai, you're not wrong, and neither is Jansaya, okay? As with everything in academics, it's all about context, and there is no singular right answer. There's just some answers that are better than others.
So may I ask here? So
Yes.
you mean if there is only two criteria in my essay, So it shouldn't be any one additional conclusion, yes? So might be or might not be, it's up to me. However, it's normal, okay, to write 2 paragraphs for special 2 criteria.
What
Yes?
what I'm saying is that there is no normal. There is no normal. Everything is determined by what your particular context and information is. So what is the argument that you're trying to build, and how is best to express that to persuade your reader? Okay, so there is no normal. There's only a very great many number of variations.
What about conclusion? May I write around, for example, 100 words as a short paragraph? However, the proportions wouldn't be the same. If the proportions are not same, is it accepted or not?
Well, first of all, in a case study, there's no true conclusion, okay? The functions of a conclusion are kind of worked into the action plan and the qualifications and et cetera, okay? So, except that you do not necessarily restate your position. It is possible that you may want to restate your position in your proof of evaluation towards the end. Okay, that's possible. But honestly, the main thing to do is keep in mind what the purpose of that section is. What is its purpose, and are you achieving that purpose? Have you managed to persuade? Have you managed to communicate clearly to a non-specialist why you have made the decision you have made? Okay?
Mm-hmm.
There's
Okay.
no one way to do it. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anonymous, cohesion. What is the difference between solution and action plan? Okay. Well, it's not quite the right Padlet, but that's okay. I will answer this question because I don't think you're the only one who's struggling with this. Think about what the purpose of each of these sections are. So as I said at the very beginning, you have to imagine that you're writing this case study because the president or the leader of an organization has asked you to do so, okay? So they have asked you to write it, but they're not the only one who is going to read it. Members of the board will read it. Upper management in all the different divisions will read it. There are many different people who need to act upon the decision once it is made, okay? The solution section, the purpose of the solution section is to make it very clear what the solution is, how it works, what it's meant to do, and what its specific specifications or requirements are. So like, do you need a equipment of this particular technical ability? Do you need, different little things about how it's supposed to function so that the non-specialist can truly understand what it is that you are talking about when you talk about your solution, okay? It's really only to communicate what it is, okay? And if you look at that template for the cover page that I sent around on Friday to everyone via email that's posted on Moodle, it specifies which questions need to be answered in the solution, okay? So the solution is kind of general, it informs everyone as to what the solution is. The action plan is a bit different. Yes, it has steps, and sometimes the steps or procedure can be kind of lightly outlined in the solution. But the action plan is where you include very specific steps and who is responsible for those steps. So for instance, it could be that you're saying at this point in time, IT needs to do this, and it's the IT department needs to be responsible for doing this. And then the president needs to make sure this is done, and this person needs to make sure that that is done. And So you're kind of thinking about who in an organization is responsible for what. If you're talking about a medical situation, it might be who in the hospital is responsible. So the surgeon or doctor will do some things, but the nurses have certain duties that they need to do. The administration has certain duties that they need to do, et cetera, et cetera. So the action plan is about saying who is responsible for what step of the procedure. That is not who is responsible is not part of the solution description. I'm not sure who asked this question because it's anonymous. Does that make sense, the difference between the solution and the action plan?
Yes, it's I have asked this question.
Okay.
Yes, it connects.
That helps?
Yes, I have one question. How solutions connects to stakeholders? I mean, if the I have in my action plan persons that is not mentioned in stakeholders, or they should be connected. Sorry.
Right. Okay. So if you, in your action plan, you have some people who are not stakeholders, that's fine, because not everyone who must do things after a decision is made is responsible for making a decision or is truly impacted personally by that decision. So they may not have a vested interest, which is what a stakeholder is. Okay. So off the top, without knowing the specifics, it doesn't seem to me like it's an immediate issue. Unless you feel that it is an issue, in which case you may want to look at whether you want to revise your stakeholders, but it can happen that way, Gildas. Does that help? I'm not sure if it is Gildas I'm talking to now that I see.
It was me, Anara. Yes,
Oh,
thank you.
Okay. Gildas, you've got your hand raised. That's why I was wondering if it was you speaking. What can I help you with?
I have a question
Okay.
about what I need to write in the proof of evaluation. If I write an evaluation criteria,
Gildas,
yes.
could you add it to the Padlet? Okay, because I'm going through the Padlet question by question. Okay, you can raise your hand if you have a question about an explanation I've given, but if you have a new question, please add it to the Padlet. Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. I know that criteria should be based on causes and stakeholders, but I am really struggling with finding proper criteria. What should I do? Okay. This is a difficult question to answer because sometimes the issue comes down to, oftentimes this comes down to a lack of focus in the problem or the causes, but I can't be sure that that's the case because I don't know the circumstances of the writing. Does anyone want to own this question and tell me a little bit more information? No? Okay. So if you're having trouble finding proper criteria, there's two things that you need to do that I can give you just general kind of advice. The first piece of advice is to go back and check, have I really focused on a narrow problem in a narrow context, a specific situation and the causes for that? Am I talking about causes or am I talking about effects? And you need to make sure that that's done well and done correctly. After that, you have to then look at, well, what are my sources? How are my sources evaluating this solution? What kind of criteria are they using? Do those criteria, which of those criteria fit the specified stakeholder that I said is who I'm writing this paper for? Okay. So who is it that's going to make the decision that you're writing this paper for? And you will know which of those criteria are probably most relevant to them. You do not need to choose criteria that would be relevant to them if you do not have source information to evaluate. So make sure you're using your source information to help you figure out which criteria not only would be relevant to your stakeholder, but also which ones are feasible for you to actually talk about because you have source information. It does no good to choose criteria for which there is no source information. Okay. So those are the two general pieces of advice that I can give for this question. Without more specifics, I don't know that I can answer it fully. Okay. Qualification. Okay, so this probably would be better on Friday, but I can try and do that. Qualification can be personal opinion. Yes, that's fine. There does not need to be sources in qualifications. And in fact, I can't even imagine how you would have source information in, other than the justification for why the qualification, why that particular criteria might be good. I think there were some sources in the Boeing, but you don't need to have source information on qualifications. It's quite often that it's written without any sources whatsoever. It's just personal opinion. Okay. Gulzat. Go ahead, Gulzat.
Good afternoon, Diane. May I add some question to this question? Qualification. I choose one qualification about my solution. It was solution about new drug in treating TB, MDR-TB, multi-drug resistant TB, and it was affordability. And affordability was, this drug was free for some countries till March of 2019.
Okay.
Should I add citation? Because it was available.
You got that information
till,
from a source? Yeah. If you got that information from a source, yes, you would cite it. Any information that you get from a source, yes, that's not a problem. Don't confuse source with evidence. They are, sometimes you can have sources for things that are not necessarily evidence. They're just statements of fact. That's fine. Okay.
Okay. And is it okay that if I add till now, it is unknown about affordability? Because I wasn't able to find more new information about affordability of the drug.
And that's why you've got it as a qualification as opposed to a criteria for evaluation, correct? Is because there's no current information?
Yes, before March it was available, but now it isn't.
Yes.
It is known. Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. You can just say that at this time the cost is unknown. That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry, here, may I ask about also qualification?
Okay, go ahead.
One question only. So it should be unavailable, or it should be available but not considered in proof of evaluation?
Either or. Either or.
Yeah, either or.
Yeah, any criteria that you think might be relevant to one or more stakeholders, but which is not considered as part of your evaluation. Yeah, whether it's available or not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, stakeholders, connection with risks, solution, and action plan. Can I ask whoever wrote this to please add this to Friday's session? I think Friday's section will be focused on the latter few sections of the case study. Okay, I want to deal with proof of evaluation today as much as possible. So anything that's here that's about action plan, risks, or qualifications, please put it into Friday's session. If we have time later in this one, I will come back to it. But for now, let's just take a look at the proof of evaluation ones. If I write screening and drugs criteria, is it accepted if I write overall 5 criteria, or it should be only drug? Well, what's your solution? Which one is your solution?
That's my question. That's drug. We may consider both of them as a solution.
Depends on whether or not there's ever an and or an or. An and is fine, but if there's an or, then you can't consider it as part of the solution. In this case, if you're talking about how screening might show that it's inappropriate because it may not deal with X, Y, and Z causes or symptoms, then that's fine to deal with in the proof of evaluation. That's fine. And there's no limits or there's no limitations or demands for a number of criteria. I think we said around 2 to 3 as a general kind of ballpark, but obviously it depends on how much needs to be said about each of those. And I mean, you can have a longer proof of evaluation. It just means that you can't have as long as sections in other places. Okay. So that's why there's no word count specific to the proof of evaluation. If you want to do all 5 and they work and they seem appropriate, then do all 5. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Solution. Should be covered the action of mechanism in body or the process of making the drug. In my case, I cannot find the mechanism of action in body as it is not well researched. I think the question becomes, what is the problem? Is the problem in the process of making it, or is the problem in something that's within the body itself? That if it's the mechanism of action, it's the theory of why it's supposed to work or how it's supposed to work. And I would suggest that you probably just need to talk to the librarian and they might be able to help you find some better sources perhaps. I would say that it's not well researched or well talked about. It's probably just that you haven't found the right sources yet. What if a table is used in action plan that we have used in lesson week 12? I don't know what lesson in week 12 was. Oh, the table. You want to just write it. No, you need to write it as a paragraph. You cannot write it as a table. You need to write it as a paragraph. Okay, the table was the planning document, but you need to write it as an actual paragraph. Okay. Is there a maximum word count for each paragraph? No. I don't think we've ever given a maximum word count for a paragraph. It needs to be cohesive and coherent. Cohesion and coherence are more difficult when you have longer paragraphs and it might become impossible to achieve if it gets too long. At the same time, too short of paragraphs are not academic. So, you know, it can't be 2 sentences, 3 sentences. It needs to be, you know, a proper paragraph. But it's all about cohesion and coherence, not about word count. How evaluation section should reflect the causes of the problem? Well, the criteria are often looking at whether it addresses specific causes. I mean, it might depend on what your field or discipline is, because some fields or disciplines don't really fix the causes. Like in medicine, for instance, not every solution is going to cure a medical issue, fix the causes like genetics, but it might treat the symptoms or the issues that arise. So the general rule is that your criteria should somehow reflect those causes or that problem. It shouldn't be unrelated, but it depends on the topic. Gulzat, did you have a question about one of the questions I just answered? Gulzat Tulepakova, you have your hand raised. Did you have a question?
Oh, no, Dian, I haven't raised my hand. Maybe some other student. No, I have no question.
Okay, I'll just lower your hand.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. Okay, does anyone have any questions about those answers at all? Is it necessary to use semi-academic sources? Absolutely not. You must use academic, at least a few academic sources, and you can use some semi-academic sources. What is absolutely not allowed are any sources written for the general public. So nothing that is non-academic. This also includes any sources that are written for younger ages. So if a source is written primarily for somebody in high school or in younger than that, then it is not appropriate as a source. Okay. Action plan. What if a table is used? So do not use the table. You need to convert the table into a paragraph for your action plan. Okay. Qualification. Could you give me an example except for Boeing? Yeah, I mean, quite frequently, the one that is used the most often is probably cost, because it's very difficult to get accurate estimates of how much something would cost. Okay. So that's probably the most common qualification that shows up in students' papers. I don't know who raised this question. Do you want to tell me a little bit more?
This is my question too, actually.
Okay,
Okay. So, except for causes, may write like as a qualification, like, for example, clinical trials. As a clinical trials further should be researched. As mine is not like is a drug, but it's not only it was conducted only preclinical trials. So
Okay, I've got a question for you then. Is that really a qualification, or is that a potential
action plan, yes.
No, potential limitation of knowing for sure how good the solution is? Because think about it for a minute. For a solution to be used, for a treatment to be used in medicine, Jansaya, you can't go directly from preclinical trial into using it in practice, can you? You have to do the clinical trials, correct?
Yes.
Why? Why do there need to be clinical trials?
Clinical trials in order to prove that that is the most appropriate drug and we may use it for further. Yeah.
Right. So if there have been no clinical trials, can you really know for sure that it is a good solution?
Who needs good solution?
I would suggest, Jansaya, that what you need to do is you need to raise that as a criticism within your proof of evaluation. So when you talk about, oh, well, preclinical trials show that it could be a very, and you need to use the hedging, could be a very good solution for blah, 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 and might meet this criteria. You then have to say, however, these are only preclinical trials, and as of to date, there have been no clinical trials conducted to further support this position. You see? It's a criticism of how well can we really know that this is a good solution? We only know that it is a good solution to be able to go to the next step. It's not good enough to start using in patients. Does that make sense?
Yes, but however, this criteria is accessibility. Yeah, is called accessibility or safety. would be better to say.
It's probably more safety than it is. I mean, the clinical trials tend to be more, from my understanding, now correct me if I'm wrong, because I am not a physician, I am not in the medical field, but my understanding is that the preclinical trials determine whether it will work, and the clinical trials are more about whether or not it can have any unforeseen complications, or
Say,
that there's
mhm.
so it's more about making sure it's safe for everyone, or who it's safe for and who it's not, right?
Mhm.
Now that's my
Yes.
impression. I'm not a doctor. It's not my
Yeah.
area of specialty. Okay.
You're right. Yes.
Okay. For that, I would recommend you talk to somebody in the medical department. But okay, let's move on to the next one. And again, let's try and deal with qualifications in the next session. Okay, but that one turned out to have some real relevance. Gulzat, I see your raised hand.
Now,
up.
yeah, I raised my
Yes.
hand. Ian, you mentioned before that most common criteria is cost. Is the cost and affordability they are synonyms? Are they synonyms?
Yes, they are. But affordability, sometimes there is enough evidence to do that, to talk about affordability, because it's done in a kind of general sense, as being it's available, and people will say it's largely affordable. Cost is more around the idea of how much cost it would cost to, say, manufacture something. Okay. So
May I clarify? Because yeah, go ahead, please.
You go ahead and qualify.
Okay. This new drug in my case study was measured by developed countries such as United Kingdom and Italy, and they found that it is very economic drug in comparison with other drugs, but now it is as I mentioned before, affordability of this drug is unknown, and I'd like to measure two criteria such as effectiveness, then safety and cost, and affordability is as a qualification. Am I right?
Well,
in
if you
this
have
way?
You can't have the same criteria in your evaluation and in your qualification. They need to be different criteria. So if you're going to talk about if you're going to talk about cost or affordability in the proof of evaluation, then you cannot talk about it in the qualification section. Does that help?
Yeah, it's help, but I'm confused because I'd like to take availability or affordability that now currently it isn't unknown. It will be it as availability of the drug or affordability?
Availability is whether or not enough people can get access to it. So for instance, I hate to bring this up because I know that it's a difficult thing for everyone right now. But the COVID-19 vaccines, they believe there will be a shortage for when they first become available, there will be a shortage. So there won't be enough to give a vaccine to everyone who will want one, and even everyone who can afford it. Okay. So the availability of the vaccine is an issue, but the research is pointing that it should be affordable. It shouldn't cost a lot. So it'll be affordable. So affordable and availability are two different things. Okay.
Okay. And may I use as qualification availability?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
If you have not used if you have not talked about that criteria in your proof of evaluation, then you can have it as a qualification.
Thank you very much. I understood now. Okay.
Good.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Intake citation in the action plan and risks. Okay, so let's deal with the action plan and risk later if we have time. Proof of it, we've only got about 4 minutes left in this session because unfortunately I do have a meeting after this one. Proof of the evaluation in this section should be negative and positive evaluation of the solution from the sources. Ideally, it should show at least criticality in terms of it's, at the very least, it should be, it's positive, but we can only say it's positive up to this point. There's a limit to that. You don't necessarily have to have a negative, but it should be, it should show that you are able to look past the, oh, how isn't this cool? This is fantastic. Oh yeah, wow, 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 kind of aspect, and be able to look at it in an academic critical sense. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily need to be both negative and positive, but there should be some sort of limitation. And we looked at an example earlier on where we said there were challenges in the solution, but that overall it was very positive. Okay. And then it says also only in this section will be counted academic sources. No. And in fact, if you look at the Boeing example, they are not all academic sources. Okay. I know we encourage you to try and bring your academic sources into this section. That still stands, largely because if students don't use academic sources, that's oftentimes where we find they get too much into the, wow, this is so exciting, this is such a great invention kind of idea, and they're not looking critically enough at it. So that's why we encourage the academic sources. But you can use a mix of academic and semi-academic sources in this section. If you look at our rubric, it does not specify where those sources are being used. Okay? So as long as they are being used responsibly and we feel that it's persuasive and objective, then it's fine. Okay, Madhyar, you have your hand up.
Yes, it is my question. So I
Yes.
wanted to clarify, and I want to ask about the sources. The one problem is that in cause essay, which when I wrote it, so there were 3 sources, but I've had a problem, and how I understand the problem were with the 1 source, but these sources were academic, all of them articles,
Okay.
but it wasn't, one of them wasn't counted as I mean article, academic source. So it scared me, and I thought that in case study somebody will not count my source, because my problem is for connect with Kazakhstan, and I don't have enough information and articles, but I found it, but I'm scared about that. So in general,
well,
so
the main thing,
what I asked
yes,
about the sections.
Okay. 1 second. So going back to the sources, the main thing to do is to remember what you have been learning and reading around text analysis. Okay. Is it meant to inform, persuade, entertain? Is it using sources and showing you their sources for information? Is there a perceived bias? Is there, you know, all these different things, all the stuff you're learning and reading about text analysis and determining what type of source something is and what it is good for, what it's not good for, all of that has relevance to deciding your sources for your case study. So in terms of sources, that's the best answer I can kind of give you at this point in time. Okay. You had a second thing though, Madhyar.
Excuse me, what?
I thought you wanted to say something more.
Yes, only about sources. How I understand, no matter, yes, it should be no less than 8 sources, academic sources, and no matter where in the case study, and it will be counted as 8 academic sources, yes, in general.
Well, the other thing is that when you write them in your reference list, we need to be able to identify what type of source it is. if you haven't done a good job of writing your reference list and we are not able to identify the type of source and we're not able to find the source, then we're going to say that it's not a source, simply because we can't confirm what type or kind of source it is. So it's incredibly important that you get that APA referencing procedure correct to help us figure out what it is. Now I'm just going to pull up the rubric here, so bear with me for a minute, because you were asking specifically about the number of sources. So in the rubric for sources, that's under academic conventions, to score a 10, you need to have at least 8, and at least some of those need to be academic. Okay. So there needs to be at least 8 in the paper, and at least some of those need to be academic. Okay.
Yes, okay.
Okay, good. Elmira, you have a question?
Yes, good afternoon, Diane. Good afternoon, everyone. Diane, I think the time is already, or may I ask a question personally about my essay, or should I better email you just not to take your time and the time of someone else?
Ask your question quickly. I've got a couple more minutes, okay?
Okay. My solution is applying, my field is education. My solution is implementing a special model of leadership to help leaders of different educational sectors to collaborate and work towards common goals. Yeah. So here it is very hard to find the criteria of evaluation because it should be connected with their style of leadership, with their motivation. I mean, even if I find the criteria, it is not properly evaluated. It just exists or not. Peter said that's okay if it just exists because you cannot measure it, he said. So what then should I write in the evaluation part of the essay? Yeah.
What did Peter have to say about that?
I didn't ask him about that. I just then I started to think, research more, and now I don't. He said, okay, you just have it, or it exists. The criteria, it happened or it didn't happen. That's all. So should I say that just only that thing just only happened? That's all. Is that okay if I do that?
No, that doesn't seem like evaluation to me. I'm not familiar enough with what the topic is that you're talking about. My advice, just based on what you said, now I might be totally wrong because Peter's a lot more familiar with the content of what you've been reading. So please take everything that I say here with, as we say in English, take it with a grain of salt, meaning don't trust it.
Okay.
But
I'll try not to trust. Yes.
Think about it. Think about it. My suggestion is that you concentrate on one type of leadership style and a solution for that particular.
Yes, I do. I do
then,
take one photo only.
Okay, then you talk about how that leadership style helps to solve some of the problems and causes, but how that solution may not work for other. And in your qualifications, perhaps you might say that it may not work for other leadership styles or, okay, so this is my first inclination, but I don't really know without seeing your source material and the contents of what you're wanting to talk about, Elmira, okay? So just think about it, go back and take another look at it, and maybe make another appointment with Peter.
Okay. Thank you. I'll try. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. Okay, actually, I saw Arai raise her hand several times and then she got booted out. And so I just want to check, is Arai here? Did you still have a question, Arai?
Yep. Yes. Hello.
Okay. Hi.
Yeah. I have a question, but I don't want to, how to say, waste your time. So.
Okay, go ahead.
We said that we should evaluate the solution from the positive and the negative, right? Can we only talk about the positive side? because my source is only according to the criteria. Yeah.
Okay, you need to still look at those positive and look at them critically. So when they're being positive about it, what are the contexts in which they are being positive about it? Does that apply to your context perfectly? Or is there a potential that it may not be quite as good in your particular context? That's first of all. So yes, it's fine to talk about things as being good solutions and meeting these criteria, but you still want to address where they are not perhaps perfect. So the idea is, tell us not only what is good about them, but how are they not quite perhaps the edges of that in terms of perfection? Is it absolutely perfect? And in which case, if it's perfect, why are more people not doing it? Why has it not been done already if it's perfect? So you want to think about what is good, but what cannot be known about how good it is for your context, or what the challenges might still be. Okay?
How about if there is no challenge, we can use it, you know, how to say?
Okay. Perhaps this might be better for a one-to-one session with your teacher. Okay, because I think you need to get into some very specifics. What I worry about, like I said, what we need to avoid is people saying, oh, wow, this is so fantastic. And this is such a great thing. And we see that quite often, especially with engineering and technology, that everybody is just this wow factor is what I call it. It's wonderful. And not seeing clearly how it may not be perfect. Okay, so maybe make a one-to-one appointment with your teacher this week. Okay.
Okay.
Take another look, and you can also come back to Friday, and maybe we'll have time to talk specifics on Friday. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. 2 more minutes until I absolutely have to be signed off. Juldis, I see your hand is still raised.
Yes, I have a question. Can you check my question in Padlet, which I write above?
Padlet.
Yeah, this one.
Name?
If I write evaluations criteria, this.
The proposed solution of changes of approaches to teaching and learning should be evaluated in terms of effectiveness of the study process through at least 2 criteria. Implementation of inclusion in mainstream schools should indicate the financial expenses of teaching staff.
I don't understand
okay,
what
so you're saying, okay, so I would say that, I mean, is a solution worth implementing? Okay, so if something is not effective, but it's not expensive and it doesn't take a lot of time, does that make it a good solution if it's not effective?
No.
Yeah, okay, so you need to talk about effectiveness, right? You need to talk about effectiveness in your proof of evaluation, but then you also need to say that that's one of your criteria for evaluation. You're going to evaluate its effectiveness for solving the problem, right? Which right now I don't see that in your description of evaluation criteria. I see only 2 criteria when actually you're wanting to do 3. You want to look at effectiveness, you want to look at financial expense, and you want to look at time. So there's 3 criteria.
And I need to write in proof of evaluation about effectiveness, about cost, and about time. How it's need to implement the new.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have information about cost, like the financial expense, then leave that out of the proof of evaluation and out of the criteria. have that as a qualification, that there is inadequate information about the cost.
Mhm.
Okay.
I need to remove this financial expenses, yes?
Well, it depends on whether you have information about it or not.
I don't find any information about cost.
You did not?
No.
You did not, or you did? Okay. So you cannot have criteria for which you do not have source information. Okay. If there's no source information for a criteria, then it's not part of your evaluation. It goes in your qualifications. Okay.
And in proof of evaluation, I need to prove that my solution is effective and don't need to take a long time, and it's not expensive. Do I need to write this in my proof of evaluation?
There's no, you must do this. Okay. It's, how do you know it's going to be a good solution? Well, to know if it's going to be a good solution, you know it needs to work. Okay. And however you define that, so how do you know it works? What is it that you're looking for as evidence to show that something works? That's one of your criteria. Okay. And in Boeing's case, that's the only criteria that we used, really. It was just broken down into 3 other pieces of that. But ultimately, the most important thing is, will it work? And that should definitely be part of your proof of evaluation. Any other criteria that you use to evaluate should be determined based on what information you can actually get from your sources. So if you have information about the time and you want to include that, fine. If you have information about the cost, fine. But there is no, you must do all of them. The only one that is kind of a standard is, will it work? Because a solution is only a solution if it's going to work. Okay?
Yes, and I understand. I have found information about effectiveness, but I don't found the cost and time, and I can read in my proof of evaluation about just only about effectiveness. Yes.
Yes, that's fine. You just have to tell us how you will determine that it's effective. What criteria will you use to determine that it's effective? Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. So guys, I am out of time. I need to get to my next meeting. So Friday, any questions that I did not get to today, please go ahead and put into Friday's Padlet. I will make sure that a reminder email goes out with that Padlet link. Okay. Other than that, thank you very much for coming today, and hopefully you have a few more things to think about that will help you continue working until Friday. Okay. Please don't forget, your teachers are your best resource, so make sure you're using those office hours.
Thank you a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.